Comics take a really long time to make. But what if you were able to make a comic within 1 month? Well, I'm going to show you not only how to do that, but why it's vital to do it if you've never made a comic before. And it all starts with Brittany O'Neill.
Brittany was in a job that wasn't going anywhere. Her drinking was starting to wear on her and she didn't like the look of her own reflection. Years and years of this cycle of work, booze and crappy food had taken its toll until one day she decided that she would start running. Over the coming years she would run further and further until one day she would end up running a marathon. Her friend even turned her story into a movie.
So what does that have to do with comics? Well, running a marathon is actually a very good metaphor for comics because they take ages and they're more difficult than you might think. Personally, I have no idea how difficult marathons are because the only running that I do is when I'm looking for my car in the car park. When did I turn into such a dad? Anyway, if you've decided that you want to make a comic or you started to make a comic but you never finished it, then you're not alone. The reason you failed to get to the finish line is because you didn't train like Brittany. She would start by running around her block and then through Central Park and then around Central Park before she even attempted her first marathon. For you to jump straight into making a long comic, that's like going from the couch to the starting line. That's just a recipe for disaster.
So, what does comic training actually look like?
Well, kind of like running training. In order to prepare to run a marathon, you need to, well, run. And in order to make good comic books, you need to make a comic book. What kind of comic book? Well, a short one. A really short one.
When you're making a comic, you need to consider composition, consistency, storytelling, character and set design, and, of course, speech bubble placement. It's a lot to think about. So instead of trying to juggle all of these things across a long story, we're going to concentrate them all across our 6 pages. We're jogging through Central Park.
But before we start jogging, we need to know where we're going. That means we need to know what our idea is and what our script is. If you've already got a really long script for your big comic, then just pick one scene to do. Otherwise, if you're not confident with your ideas or you have no ideas, then just pick a scene from your favorite movie or TV show and make a comic about that. If you're struggling to pace out the scene, then split the story in 2-page segments. The first 2 pages are the beginning, the second 2 pages are where we climax the story, and the final 2 pages are the conclusion. It doesn't have to be that rigid, but sometimes it can help if you're struggling to have a little bit of structure. Okay, so we know where we're going, but what are we going to wear? That's right, it's time to design. Did that metaphor work? Yeah. No. For this part, take your main characters and draw them facing forwards, to the side and to the back. If you have time, then draw them in lots of different poses. If the background or set is important as well, then sketch that out in advance too. These are all going to be for your future reference when you're drawing your comic. Next, take your script and draw little thumbnails next to the key moments. This will give you an early idea of what your comic is going to look like. We're ready to run, folks. All of that stretching and prep work is worth it though. So don't skip over it or you'll pull a muscle. I know you want to skip it, but it will make your life a lot easier if you don't. So now that we're up and running, we're going to start making this comic book. All of those warm-ups and route planning are going to pay off now. By using the thumbnails you sketched out earlier, you should have a pretty good understanding of how your comic is going to look.
But watch out for bears!
I assume that's what runners need to do. I don't often leave the house. For our purposes, bears are speech bubbles, or word balloons. You need to ensure that you've left enough space for them during this phase, so watch out for them. We've made it past the toughest bit of the run. Now we're inking.
Now the way you decide to jog is up to you. Maybe you're a Phoebe and you jog with carefree abandon and you're not bothered about perfect form. Or maybe you're a Rachel and you chug along at a steady, simple rate. How you decide to draw and ink the comic is up to what feels best to you. You'll get better at drawing and inking over time. This exercise isn't about making pretty pictures necessarily, so do what's comfortable.
So we're jogging and we notice a drinking fountain up ahead. I assume you have those in Central Park? If you're from New York, then let me know in the comments. Do you want to drink the water or do you want to power through to the finish line? Colouring a comic is kind of similar to that drinking fountain. You don't have to do it, but it can help. This is gin. And the way you approach colouring is similar to the way you approach the water. Do you want to splash yourself with the water, or do you want to stop and savour every last drop? Are you going to throw colour down loosely, or are you going to meticulously render out every detail? Again, it's up to you. But just remember, every decision that you make will influence the amount of time it's going to take for you to complete your marathon or your comic. We're sore, we're in pain, we're exhausted, but we did it. Congratulations, you've just finished a comic book. You've done something that most people just couldn't do. Now slap a cover on it, have a sit down and a cup of tea, because we're going to ask ourselves 3 questions.
Question number 1. Did you enjoy making the comic book? Question number 2. Can you repeat that process for 24 pages, 100 pages, more? Question number 3. Which part of the process did you struggle with the most?
If you answered yes to question 1 and 2, then you might just be ready for your marathon. And because you've made a 6-page comic from start to finish, you're much more prepared for a more ambitious project. But I have to be honest with you, I didn't do a 6-page comic. I did 3 of them. Don't worry, I'm not going to try and sell you these because they're not available for sale. My point is, for each one of these that I did, I learned a lot about my weaknesses as well as how long comics actually take to make. If you make informed decisions before you start making your comic book, then you're much more likely to actually enjoy the process, and there will be far fewer nasty surprises along the way. Like bears. Also, you might just find out that you don't actually enjoy the process nearly as much as you thought you would. And it's better to invest only a month to find that out rather than years. If you'd rather sit on the couch and eat crappy food and watch Netflix, then that's fine. But if you want to be more like Brittany O'Neill, then you need to start with a jog around Central Park before you start your first marathon. And if any part of the process was confusing to you, I've been developing a playlist that should provide some answers. And if you can't find them there, then let me know in the comments and I'll add that to my list of videos to make in the future. Subscribe for more and I'll see you soon.